The more hits we play, the more hits we get. URLradio.net. Stacy Sturm.
Michael Kashey.
That afternoon show, but it's kind of like an early afternoon show because we have a very special guest in the studio with us today. We have Michael, it's Uslan, right?
Uslan.
Michael Uslan. And he is actually speaking up at BSC tonight, and we're going to tell you why. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So excited to have you in the studio. You're like, I'm not going to say, this sounds unflattering if I say you're like a geek's dream come true. But we're
At least you're using the right word. I am a
true.
Self-professed lifetime comic book geek.
Yeah. Well, my son is a geek too. He's learned the difference between geek and nerd. They're very different. And you don't want to offend each community.
No, it's very, very true. I mean, to give you an idea how extensive that is in my life, I was at the very first Comic-Con ever held on the planet Earth. Only 200 of us were at the first Comic-Con. And we got a chance, and this was 1964.
Yeah.
We had a chance to all meet for the first time face to face, or as I like to say, pimple to pimple.
Yeah.
And talk comic books and trade comic books, and it was quite the experience. But
How
I've been
old
in
were
it a
you
long
at the
time.
time?
13.
13.
Yeah. And my mom helped me make my costume that night. And that Saturday night, there were 197 guys and 3 girls. And the guys who were putting on the con go, what are we going to do Saturday night? They said, well, let's just tell everyone to come dressed up as their favorite superhero and we'll give out prizes. That was the night cosplay was born.
Shut up.
Yeah. And I was there in costume, I'm proud to say.
What did you go as?
The 1940 DC Comics Sandman, the guy with the gas mask and the fedora.
Yeah. So awesome. Like, I'm really kind of geeking out now with this. Now, Michael, you are the one that's been responsible for bringing Batman to the big screen, Catwoman, Lego Movie. Now, have you been responsible for all the Batman movies?
Yeah. Back in my 20s, I did this very, very strange thing. With my partner, Ben Melniker, I acquired the motion picture rights to Batman from DC Comics.
Yeah.
We raised some money privately, went to DC Comics where I had been working starting in college. They hired me and I started writing Batman comics in the shadow when I was still an undergrad. And the president of DC Comics at the time was a wonderful man who had mentored me into the business. It was kind of like, your uncle. And when I approached him that I wanted to buy the rights to Batman and make dark and serious Batman movies to show the world that he wasn't just this joke. He wasn't the guy, the pot-bellied funny guy with the pow zaps and whams that everybody was laughing at.
Yeah.
I wanted to show the true Batman the way Bob Kane and Bill Finger created him in 1939 as this creature of the night. And he said, oh my God, he goes, Michael, please don't do this. I'd hate to see you lose all your money. Don't you understand? Since Batman went off the air on television, the brand is dead. He's as dead as a dodo. Nobody's interested in Batman anymore. And I said, yeah, but if we do it in a dark and serious way, nobody's ever seen a movie like this before. It's almost going to be like a new form of entertainment. And he said, is there any way I can talk you out of this? And I said, no. He says, all right, schmoozle, come on in. And we began a 6-month negotiation. On October 3rd, 1979, we signed the contracts, acquired the rights to Batman. I quit my job. I knew nobody in Hollywood. And I didn't come from money. I'm a blue-collar kid from New Jersey. My dad was a stonemason, and my mom was a bookkeeper. And I thought it was going to be a slam dunk that everyone would line up at my door and see the potential for sequels and animation and toys and games. And then I was rejected by every single studio in Hollywood. They told me I was crazy. It was the worst idea they ever heard. And as a result, from the time we got the rights to Batman till we were able to get the first movie made in 1989, it took 10 years. 10 years of rejection by everybody.
So when did you finally hear, and how did you finally hear that Batman was going to come to the big screen?
Well, the breakthrough really came around 1986, and that was when this young, budding genius named Tim Burton waltzed into everyone's lives. Tim Burton deserves all the accolades and credit for it because he came into this with a vision. It had never been done before. Nobody had ever done a dark and serious comic book superhero movie before. And he realized, the first thing he said was, Gotham City has to be the third most important character in this story. From the opening frames of the movie, we've got to get audiences to suspend their disbelief and believe in Gotham City. if we don't do that, they will never believe seriously in a guy getting dressed up as a bat and going out and fighting a guy like the Joker. And he was absolutely right about that. The second thing he said that was so important is this is not about Batman. He said this is all about Bruce Wayne. And that audiences have to believe that this is a guy so driven, so obsessed to the point of being psychotic that he would get dressed up in a costume like this and go out and do this stuff. And he was absolutely right about it.
Do you have any questions, Kashey?
I'm just kind of listening right now.
He's just taking it all in right now.
You know what happened was it didn't simply impact the box office. Mm-hmm. That first movie in '89 wound up impacting the world culture. There was a shift. Something very special happened. That summer of '89, I could not walk through Times Square in New York 20 steps without seeing someone in a Batman cap or a Batman T-shirt. Mm-hmm. It was the first movie ever publicized and advertised with billboards and posters that didn't have the name of the movie on it. All it had was a gold oval with a black bat and a date. And that was pretty amazing.
Now, I have to ask, why Batman?
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Was it your favorite? Have you always just loved Batman?
Yeah. I'm a comic book geek, as we've discussed. I love all superheroes. I bought and collected everything. Marvel, DC. In fact, I have a hard time understanding today exactly why some fans are utterly Marvel or utterly DC.
Okay, it's such a relief because we were both wearing Deadpool jackets when we came in here, and we're like, ditch the Deadpool jackets.
I loved everything. I read Archie. I read Richie Rich. I read Classics Illustrated. Everything that came out at the time I bought and read. Mm-hmm. So it was a very, very different set of circumstances for me. But with Batman, unlike Spidey or the Hulk or Superman, he was human. Mm-hmm. I contend that Batman's greatest superpower is his humanity. So when I was a kid, when I was 8 years old and really into this for the first time, I got into Superman earlier because Batman was too scary when I was like 5 and 6. Mm-hmm. So I had to evolve into Batman a little bit. But I really identified with Batman as a kid. I believed that if I studied hard and worked out real hard, and if my dad bought me a cool car, I could be this guy. and that was that was it for me. And also, if you step back and think about it, Batman has the most primal origin story in the entire mythology of comics, and it's a kind of origin story that not only transcends borders but cultures as well. And that's one of the reasons that he's been so successful. If I had to say two more things that have made Batman so successful and why I loved it so much, number one, he has the greatest supervillains in the history of comics. His rogues gallery can't be matched. Spider-Man has great ones, Flash has great ones, but nobody quite equals the villains of Batman. And then the car.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, so you've worked on all the Batman movies currently, and are you working? Good Lord, I am just collect your thoughts. Are you working currently with the Killing Joke at all? That was the one that I've been waiting for years to come out.
I'm an executive producer on The Killing Joke, and I'm glad you brought that up. Some of the greatest Batman stories in any media have been told through the animation. Mm-hmm. The people who have been working in animation, starting with Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, Paul Dini, Alan Burnett, Andrea Romano, these people are absolutely brilliant. There's a few Batman animateds that I think are absolutely remarkable. Mask of the Phantasm, possibly one of the best Batman stories ever told. What they were able to do in animation with the story of Mr. Freeze. Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker. Mm-hmm. And now in this era, to have the opportunity to let these brilliant people loose to do Batman Year One and Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke, which to me are probably the three most seminal Batman graphic novels ever made. It's incredible. It's stunning. And those folks deserve massive credit for that.
Now, there seems to be a trend going on since Deadpool came out, and everyone's like, is this going to be the era now where all of the superhero movies go R?
Well, there's one thing that Hollywood is best at, and that is imitation and saturation. Ultimately, probably killing the goose that laid the golden egg in the process. I think it's great to push the boundaries. It's not the first one that was R. We did Constantine years ago, which was R-rated.
Spawn.
Spawn.
Yeah, Spawn.
Yeah, so it's not the first. It's not like, whoa, this has never in history been done before.
Yeah.
But it's great to push boundaries where it's appropriate and where it makes sense to the integrity of the character. I mean, if you took a character, what would be a good example? If you took the Fantastic Four and made it R-rated, that would really violate the integrity of the characters and the story. So you have to do it the right way. And my God, on Deadpool, they really did it the right way. I loved the movie. I really enjoyed it. But you're not going to do that with Guardians of the Galaxy.
That was great too, though, yeah. Okay, so speaking about being a comic book geek, you were the first instructor to teach an accredited course on comic book folklore.
Yeah.
How did you get that done?
Well, I'm going to actually be telling this story
Tonight?
tonight
Okay.
at the university.
I'm working.
So
It's got a work day yet.
let's just say
Okay.
it is, as a tease, it is a pretty incredible story that changed my life at that very minute. Changed the rest of my life at that very minute. And I will explain what happened and how that happened and what the impact was.
But you are good at building suspense. You are good at this. I could see why
I
you're
write
the
comics
producer.
and graphic novels and I make movies. So if I'm not at least an adequate storyteller, I better go find something else to
That's
do
a
quickly.
good point.
But along the way, with all the geekiness, I wound up writing the first textbook on comic books that Indiana University published. I taught the first correspondence course on comic books. I now have the first doctorate in comic books, courtesy of Monmouth University in New Jersey.
It's crazy.
This past year, my son David and Stan Lee and I have taught the Smithsonian Institution's first online course on comic books and superheroes through edX. It is free. For the initial course we offered, which is 17 lessons, we had students from 165 different countries sign up for it. But what they allowed me to do was they brought me to Washington, D.C. for a couple of weeks and took me into the sub-basement of the Smithsonian, where I was allowed to rifle through their comic book and original art and
Yes.
memorabilia collection. So you're not old enough, but maybe you saw it on TV, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, I'm way old enough.
All right, so-
I went to the movie when it came out.
Well, good job.
Thank you.
If you remember the last scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark, that's kind of what it was like being in the Smithsonian, being able to go into their
Yeah.
comics collection.
Now you bring me to my next question. Was a lot of people don't know you were also involved with National Treasure, which is one of my favorite movies, and now it makes sense since you're such a history buff.
We kind of have a thing too for Nicolas Cage.
We have a huge thing for Nicolas Cage. He's like my top two crushes.
You know,
You're not number
you're the
three,
Second,
but-
You're the second lady in Bismarck in the last 12 hours who told me this. This is really, really interesting. Now, the only one exception I would say about that is I still have a hard time picturing the what if Nicolas Cage had gone forward with his Superman movie.
Yeah.
Picturing his head on Superman's body is still a jump for me. But with National Treasure, the project I was working on originally that ultimately turned into National Treasure began with this ring that I wear. And
Can I touch it?
it's a Masonic ring from
I've seen
99
that.
years ago. It was my grandfather's.
Oh my god.
And he came over to the United States from Russia. He's a stone-mason. Came over with his brothers, who were all Masons. And they settled in a town in New Jersey. And there, the Masons in that town would not allow them to join the Masonic Lodge because they were Jewish. And my grandfather and his brothers applied to the National Masonic and asked for to form their own lodge. And they then gave them the charter to do that. And this is his ring from 1917 as its first president. So it is that connection to the whole Masons thing that started me on this project that ultimately evolved into National Treasure.
That's crazy. I could talk to you forever, but I know we're running out of time. I have like 1,000. You have a law degree? Is that what I understand? Did you go to law school?
Shh. I don't want my kids to know. I couldn't,
That you could have been
I
a
couldn't
lawyer?
stand the shame of them knowing I'm a lawyer. Yeah, I have 3 degrees from Indiana University. I have my bachelor's degree, which was in history. I have my master's degree in urban education, and I have my doctorate in law, my JD.
You strayed so far off the path. Thank you for that. I mean, that's good.
Well, you can thank my wife and my mom, whose whole mantra was, all right, this whole comic book thing and movie thing, this is great, and this whole Batman thing, great, but you better have something to fall back on if it doesn't work. I pleaded with them to just let me go out and buy a Serta Perfect Sleeper to fall back on, but it didn't work, and so I finally did 3 years hard time at law school.
All right, we have time real quickly, too, then, to talk about your upcoming projects. What are some of the things you're working on, Michael?
Oh, gosh. You know, I was lecturing at Georgetown University, and during Q&A, a young lady got up and said, Mr. Uslan, what exactly is your job? And I had to think about it for a second. I said, well, really, every day I report to a sandbox, and I play with my favorite toys. That's what I do for a living. And that's what I continue to do, which is great. So it doesn't matter how white-haired I'm getting, have gotten. I still get to be 12 for the rest of my life, and that is really cool. Upcoming projects are things that I'm passionate about. So I'm taking some comics, pulp magazines, things that I loved as a kid. Thunder Agents, which has been around 50 years. The group of artists who put that together are legendary. Wally Wood, who designed Daredevil's red costume with the double D insignia for Marvel, and came out of EC Comics and all of their science fiction work. Steve Ditko, the co-creator of Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, worked on Thunder Agents. Gil Kane, who co-created Green Lantern and the Atom in the Silver Age. Mike Sikowski, the original artist of Justice League. I mean, wow. You know, I love these characters. I love the whole unique concept, so we're developing that as a movie right now. We're also developing Doc Savage. Doc Savage was a pulp hero created in 1933 who was the primary inspiration to Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in the creation of Superman. So Doc Savage was the Man of Bronze. Superman became the Man of Steel. Doc Savage was Clark Savage. I don't have to say the rest. No. But let me mention one other thing. Doc Savage in the early 1930s had a secret hideout in the Arctic called the Fortress of Solitude. And it was some years later that Superman blatantly ripped the poor guy off.
So let's talk about your new graphic novel that's out. You announced it just a couple days ago, Lone Ranger Meets Green Hornet.
Yeah, it will be out starting July 6th from Dynamite Comics. It's going to be first issued as a miniseries, and then the graphic novel itself will come out. I couldn't be more excited about it as a comic book geek, as a comic book historian, as a lover of movies, old-time radio, because we've got these 2 legendary characters, the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet. The Lone Ranger was created in 1933 for WXYZ Radio in Detroit. The Green Hornet, created by the same man in 1936 for WXYZ in Detroit. When he created it, he created the Lone Ranger to be John Reed, who with his brother Dan Reed Sr. were ambushed by Butch Cavendish. Cavendish thought they were all dead, but Tonto comes by and realizes there's still a breath of life in John Reed and nurses him back to health. John Reed is then the lone Texas Ranger standing and goes on to become the Lone Ranger. He had a nephew, Dan Reed Sr.'s son, Dan Reed Jr., who sometimes rode with him and Tonto. Now we move over to the Green Hornet show. Green Hornet was Britt Reed. Britt Reed's father owned and published the Daily Sentinel newspaper. His father was Dan Reed Jr., i.e., therefore, the Green Hornet is the grand nephew of the Lone Ranger. But in the Depression, these 2 characters were sold off to different companies. So there has never been a legal path to putting the 2 of them together in one family saga. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm showing how the Green Hornet is actually the modern-day urban version of the Lone Ranger. Wearing the mask, people think he's a bad guy. Instead of Tonto, he has Kato. Instead of Silver, he has the Black Beauty. And it's going to be a saga about the torch passing from one generation to another.
This is going to be a game changer.
I hope. I'm just having fun.
Yeah. So you're speaking tonight up at Bismarck. Before we get out of here, anything else you want to ask Michael, Kashey?
I'm still trying to think,
Michael,
so
Kashey?
I guess I'm going to have to call it good.
Well, yeah, thanks for being on with us today, Michael.
It is my pleasure. I love interviews with people who actually know this stuff, and read this stuff, and love this stuff. I think it makes a huge, huge difference. And, all I can say is, kind of in closing, when I grew up, which was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people really looked down on anyone over the age of 12 who read a comic book. They thought there was something wrong with you mentally, if not socially, and probably both. There was a real stigma attached to it. When I got to college, collecting and reading comic books, it was considered subversive. And the whole thing about comics was deemed very, very subversive. Now, today, and in fact, when I was in high school, I mean, as a boy, 15, 17, 18, wanting to date girls who would then find out I still read and collected comic books made me what I would call date challenged. But now today, it's cool.
Yeah.
And if you look at the movies and the cartoons and who's reading the comics and the manga and everything, it's females as well as males. Everybody's into it. It is hip. It is responsible for some of our biggest movies, some of our biggest TV series, some of the biggest video games, and it is permeating the culture around the world. If you had told me back then that the day would come when Captain America would be playing in theaters in China, I would have said you had to be crazy. But our contemporary mythology is our superheroes, and it's permeating everywhere. So as one of the true early comic book geeks who was involved in organizing and building fandom and going to the first Comic-Con and going through all of this and being rejected for 10 years wanting to do a serious Batman movie, what I now say in retrospect is, we win.
Yeah.
We win.
That's true. I will be remiss if I don't ask you about this. Ben Affleck getting a lot of hate about being Batman.
Until people saw the movie.
Right.
And now everybody's crazed
Yep.
about Ben's performance. It's magnificent.
That was me.
Yeah.
I went in there thinking I was going to hate it, and I thought he nailed that old, tired Bruce Wayne.
So you were one of the
Bruce Wayne.
fans that just want to slap silly, because you have put me through this now a third time. It started with Michael Keaton when he was announced that he was, and it's not Batman. It's when it was announced he was playing Bruce Wayne. It's all about Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
And then after people went to see it, the fans went to see it, oh my God, they never wanted anyone else to play Bruce Wayne again. Then Heath Ledger, when it was announced he was going to be the Joker, they said, how could you have a guy who just played a gay cowboy be the Joker? It's going to destroy that character. And I thought they were going to surround the studio in pitchforks and torches until they saw it. And then they said nobody should ever play the Joker
I
again.
knew he was going to be good as the Joker. He's so versatile. He was so versatile.
Amazing person and performer. And now it was the same thing all over again with Ben Affleck. And then people saw it and wow, loved it, loved Wonder Woman. Got a great
I
response.
did not like Wonder Woman.
Really? You're the first
didn't.
person I know to say that.
She didn't. I was Linda Carter. I was Linda Carter as Wonder Woman. And
Oh, okay. I've dealt with the Adam West fan club, and I know Adam, and he and I have been on panels together at Comic-Cons. And what he did in that moment, I recognized was a great thing. Mm-hmm. It's just that it bothered me that everybody was laughing at Batman. And that's what killed me. That's what killed me. There were no other media interpretations of Batman that you could look to get the other side of the story. Linda Carter was classic Wonder Woman. Mm-hmm. Absolutely classic, right out of the comic books. But there's no reason generationally that you can't bring on somebody else to be Wonder Woman for a new generation. Mm-hmm. When the biggest question I get at Comic-Cons all over whenever I speak, which is the one true Batman? Is it Adam West? Is it the animation, Kevin Conroy? Is it Michael Keaton? Is it Christian Bale? Is it Ben Affleck? And my answer is always pretty much the same thing. It's whichever Batman was the first one that you encountered.
True.
Maybe when you were 12 years old or 10 years old, that is your true Batman.
I think this is why Linda Carter was my Wonder Woman. She seemed so badass. And honestly, I felt like this Wonder Woman was very model-like.
Oh, not
very
at all.
model.
See, she has the look at the
Very
action
model-y,
scene in the
like,
end. She's got a
you know?
smirk on her face when she's taking him on. I
think it's because there's so many like badass women out there now to choose from. Back we really didn't have that many, but now there's like so many. So I think it's hard.
That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a very good thing.
Yeah. It
So
took us.
that's a good problem to
It took
have.
us as a civilization a long time to get to this point,
Yeah.
and we still have a lot of work to do.
True.
Well, Stacy.
Well, thanks for being on with us today, Michael.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me here.